It's a fresh spring day in the year 1506. The child emperor of the Ming, Zhengde, has been on the throne for less than a year. A long line of men process pensively to the main gate of Beijing's Imperial examination compound. As each arrives, his name is checked against the register. Then he is stripped to be searched, while his luggage and clothing are inspected. If nothing is amiss, he is granted admission. The men, young and old, are students, examinees, hoping to sit the palace exams. These are no ordinary exams. Those who pass will find the running of an empire. Power and the glory will also pass, in part, into their hands. The stakes could not be higher, and security is tight. The examination takes place over several days, with the candidates living in separate cells, forbidden to communicate with one another. On watchtowers around the examination halls stand armed guards. Their presence reminds everybody of the solemnity and privilege attached to the occasion. This is the Kaju, the Chinese Imperial examination system, the oldest civil service exams in the world. The system ran for over 1,000 years, but its roots go way back to the early empire and beyond, in the need for rulers to find capable men to do their bidding. It was in this coalescence of scholarship and power that the roots of the Chinese obsession with education were founded, and that families, great and small, generation after generation, strove to maintain their social status through literary merit. It is said of China that you can conquer it from the saddle, but you can't rule from the saddle, meaning the country is too large and complex to be stable unless it has a competent civil administration. The stories of how rulers found capable ministers to aid them are both legion and legend, but in the end, one method triumphed: literary examination. In late Imperial China, from the 15th century onwards, there were three levels to the imperial examinations: the provincial, the metropolitan, and the highest, the palace examination, the latter sometimes being overseen by the emperor himself. The top three places in the palace examination would guarantee the winners eternal glory and a senior position among the guardians of Confucian culture in the Imperial Academy. Another notable distinction was made for those scholars who passed in the first place at each level of the system, a triple first. Outstanding students from the provincial level exams might be admitted to the palace examinations directly, but for most it was a long climb up the ladder of progress, taking and often retaking in the triennial exam system. Such was the pressure to join the system that in the 17th century, a primary qualifying exam was introduced called the Tong Sa, the children's examination, though it was open to all ages.
从明清科举的考试系列来看，童试、乡试、会试、殿试是依次递进的，必须先考上秀才，才能取得考举人的资格，参加省一级的乡试。考上举人之后呢，才能取得考进士资格，参加全国性的会试和殿试，可谓层次分明，序列严密。
The system of examination arose from necessity, from ever-increasing refinement of previous selection methods. In the Zhou dynasty, from around 1046 to 256 BC, and during preceding Xia and Shang dynasties, ministerial positions were often the hereditary privilege of leading aristocratic families. Zhou Gong, the Duke of Zhou, established the right system as a way of defining the duties and privileges of the ruling elite. By defining seniority through a strict system of patriarchal primogeniture, he sought to stabilize the fraternal and frequently fratricidal rivalries in the great families. He himself was the system's shining example by serving as minister to his 13-year-old nephew, who became king on the death of the Duke's elder brother. Once when the Duke was having dinner, a servant interrupted him, saying that a minister was waiting to see him. The Duke immediately put down his chopsticks, spat the food from his mouth, and rushed to see the minister. His son asked him, "Why can't you wait until you finish dinner?" The Duke replied, "A minister wouldn't come to see me at this hour unless it was something concerning the welfare of the whole country." This story, perhaps apocryphal, is celebrated not just because it shows the Duke's devotion to his monarch, but more especially his sense of duty to the nation. Under the guidance of the Duke, the Western Zhou were able to successfully consolidate their power, and when King Cheng came of age, the Duke duly handed over the reins of power to his nephew.
在大一统帝国时代，世卿世罗制可以使国家统治以及强大的血缘纽带得以维系。但到了春秋时期，地主阶级作为一支新兴政治力量登上历史舞台，他们要求打破任人唯亲，呼吁礼贤下士。世卿世罗制在这一时期显得不合时宜，一种新的适应地主阶级统治需要的人才选拔制度呼之欲出。
During the spring and autumn period, from the 8th century BC onwards, the Zhou realm was increasingly divided into semi- and then fully independent statelets, each vying for power with each other. The ruler of the state of Qin, Duke Mu, was eager to find talents that could place his domain above the rest. In 656 BC, an advisor recommended a man named Bai Li Shi. A former slave, Bai had fled one state to another, ending up in the state of Chu, working as a cowherd. Desperate to get hold of Bai to test his abilities, Duke Mu of Qin decided to pay a large ransom to redeem him. However, the advisor pointed out, obviously the Duke of Chu doesn't know the value of Bai Li Shi, which is why he is made to work as a cowherd. If you offer a large ransom, the Duke will know that Bai Li Shi is valuable, so you should just offer him the ordinary price of a slave. Duke Mu took this advice and redeemed Bai Li Shi for 5 sheepskins. When Bai Li Shi arrived in the state of Qin, Duke Mu was disappointed to find that Bai Li Shi was already in his 70s. But when Bai Li Shi spoke, the Duke's doubts immediately disappeared. Bai said, "If you expect me to chase beasts in the forest, I am too old. But if you expect me to provide strategies for the welfare of the state, I am still very young." Bai Li Shi went on to become Qin's chief minister, and Qin, eventually, after many, many more years, would emerge as the dominant state in all China.
到了汉朝，招贤纳士被汉武帝确定为一种完备的入仕制度，规定由地方官考察其下期内的士人，再寄荐给朝廷。这种自下而上考察和寄荐人才为官的制度，就是察稽制。所寄人才应分门别类，孝成清廉者谓之孝廉，才学出众者谓之谋才艺登，品行贤良、行为方正者谓之贤良方正，等等等等。
Loyalty was one of the key qualities considered. At the end of the East Han Dynasty, around 100 AD, Chen Fan, governor of Lian Prefecture, heard of a young man named Zhao Xuan living in his province. Zhao Xuan was a scholar who had gained much local admiration from his devotion to his parents. After his parents died, he had lived chastely for 3 years, as the Book of Rites prescribes, and he had further built a lodging next to his parents' graves, better to tend after them. Chen Fan decided to pay a visit to Zhao Xuan. During their conversation, Chen discovered that Zhao had 5 children, all born during his supposed years of abstinence. Chen Fan was outraged and ordered Zhao punished for his temerity in accepting the praise of others.
古代礼制规定，守丧3年，就算报答了父母的养育之恩；如果守孝超过3年，非但不合礼数，而且还有哗众取宠之嫌。察居制实行之初，确实为国家选拔了不少贤德之才，但是到了东汉后期，察居制的弊端就逐步的显露。居谏官营私舞弊，被居谏者是沽名钓誉，这种情况十分普遍，以至于出现居秀才是不知书，居孝廉复别居的现象。
When the Han Dynasty finally collapsed, the empire was split into 3 kingdoms. Cao Pi, the first king of Wei, was, like his father, the Han general and statesman Cao Cao, an accomplished scholar and poet. Cao Pi didn't want to entrust the selection and recommendation system entirely to local officials. So he established, in addition, a central office to select men from across the whole empire to be recommended to him directly. However, Cao Pi's reform only solved the problem temporarily. Soon the officials of the new office began to take bribes as well. The selection and recommendation system was still dominated by aristocratic families. It not only prevented men of ability from achieving important positions, it also created tensions between local and central governments.
到了隋朝，隋文帝杨建深感旧的察期制度有严重的弊端，在公元583年。废止了9品中正制，从而一举打破豪门氏族对士族的垄断，一种新的通过公平竞争方式取得的制度， 科技制度应运而生。科技制度出现，预示了中国血管制度从此迈入一个新的历史时期。
However, many believe that the germ of the examination system sprang from the Han Dynasty around 200 BC. According to folklore, one day when the Emperor Wen was working in his office in the palace, the noonday sunlight was suddenly veiled by clouds. The emperor and his servants were deeply troubled, as any abnormal phenomena were considered bad omens. As the servants brought out lamps and candles, the Emperor Wen struggled to see the reason behind this warning from the heaven. In the thinking of the time, the Emperor, the Son of Heaven, had to live in perfect harmony with the cosmos in order for there to be peace and prosperity among his people. The empire was already suffering from floods and plagues. The emperor was forced to reflect on himself. He summoned his ministers, inquiring of them if there were ways to improve his governance, but nobody gave him a satisfactory answer. Later, he issued a decree calling officials of all levels to recommend men of intelligence and virtue to provide candid criticism of his rule and suggest ways to make amends for any of his wrongdoings. He personally interviewed all those sent forward and offered them positions suited to their capabilities, regardless of their background.
这就是贤良方正国的由来。 通过自告对策这一科目的考试来选拔人才，因此有学者将贤良方正科的设立作为科举制的起源。但是，贤良方正属于特科，是汉代统治者以积蓄非常之才而临时举行的考试，其中举荐是第一位，考试是第二位，因此科举起源于汉代的说法并不科学。
Others suggest the system was actually brought about by Emperor Yang of the Sui. The emperor, later to be overthrown for his despotism, was an ardent lover of poetry. In 606 AD, he initiated a competition for all learned men with literary talent. Anybody could enter, and no recommendation or introduction was necessary. Emperor Yang was the second son of Emperor Wen, founder of the Sui dynasty. He coveted the position of crown prince, which had naturally gone to his elder brother. emperor considered his second son too frivolous and fond of pleasure. This may have been true, but he was also cunning, and he managed to convince his father that he was not a royal wastrel, but fit to give dedicated service on the throne. Perhaps Emperor Wen's first impressions were correct, for as emperor, Yung's extravagant expenditure forced him to raise taxation and impose forced labor to such an extent that eventually a series of rebellions broke out across the empire. The Sui did much to promote culture, Buddhism in particular. But it was the Emperor Yung's love of poetry that broke the mold of the recommendation system and opened the way for any man of sufficient ability to offer his talents to the Son of Heaven.
虽然隋代的科举制还仄籍雏形，规制尚不完备，考试时间、考试内容也不固定，但是开科起试、自由报考并形成制度，却是由隋炀帝首开。因此，进士科的设置在中国科举史上具有重要的地位。正所谓，即作事业简，即将毕业具。
A third line of thinking says that even if the foundations were put in place by the Sui, the examination system proper did not begin until the Tang in 621 AD. Records from that year show that students who traveled to the imperial capital at Chang'an now faced an extended examination in 3 subject areas. All the candidates would have passed their provincial examinations, which qualified them to take the metropolitan examination in the capital. The expanded syllabus for the exams would require scholars to demonstrate a much wider range of talents. The successful candidates would be awarded positions in government in accordance with their qualifications and aptitude. It was a system that rode out the vicissitudes of time, even as dynasties rose and fell. It was still to be copied and admired even 1,300 years later. The examinations of 621 laid the foundations for a uniquely successful system of government, one that no future dynasty could dispense with until the imperial system itself came to an end.
当时的唐王朝仍忙于减除隋朝的残余势力和农民起义。 首要任务是用武力平定抗乱，巩固政权，和无暇在选功制度上标新立异。因此，唐武德4年所反映的选士制度，应当是沿袭隋朝，并非唐朝新创，故有大唐公示之法，多循隋制，始于隋大业，成于唐贞观之说。
The establishment of a new system had its own inevitable logic. Land reforms under the Sui had spread the empire's wealth more widely. Administrative changes, the construction of granaries, the building and operation of the Grand Canal, all presented a need and an opportunity for a new class of technocrats selected on merit. Emperor Wen had issued a decree that wealth should be enjoyed by the people, not kept in storehouses. With this shifting economic power also came a shift in political power, and China stood on the brink of a new golden age.
制度兴起的背后，往往是国家利益格局的重大调整，是洗白后的利益集团对稀缺社会资源的重新划分。科技不为门第所成，世人可以通过自由报考、自由录取，跻身统治者的行列。参与帝国管理，代表了新兴地主阶层的根本利益。因此，科技取代九品中等制就成为历史的必然。
Under the Tang dynasty, the exams were held in the 10th month of every year. Though the Tang were ardent promoters of Taoism and Buddhism, Confucian studies became core of the higher level exams, along with the composition of poetry. The Tang enjoyed vigorous relations with their western neighbors, and trade on the Silk Road flourished as never before. Polo was among the foreign habits for which the Tang acquired a great fondness. But the world of the mind, culture, and arts was never neglected. In 793, the 15-year-old Yuan Zhen, a poet, went to visit Li He, another poet he deeply admired. He handed his card to Li's gatekeeper and asked if he might gain admittance to speak to Li. Yuan Zhen just passed the highest level of the Imperial exams, marking him as a young man of extraordinary talent and promise. The sort of person an established poet like Li He might want to take an interest in. When the gatekeeper returned, Yuan was shocked and humiliated to have his card returned and be told that he could not come in.
李贺拒见元圣，那是因为元圣明经极地。明经科是唐代科举考试的科目之一，主要考核考生对儒家经典的熟悉程度。考试形式呢为贴经和默译两种。贴经是截取经典中的某些段落，让考生做填充题。 默译则要求考生回答典籍中制定的经文的前人注述或者上下文。
The most testing part of the imperial examination was not the Confucian texts, but an oral examination on how the participant viewed national affairs and what strategies he might propose to the emperor. Literary talent was seen as closely allied to this, in that being able to compose eloquent and persuasive communications was essential. Li He eschewed all those connected to the imperial examinations because he himself had been disqualified for a petty and obscure reason. His enemies argued that Li's father's name was taboo, coinciding with royalty, and therefore Li was disbarred. This denied Li He any hope of a career in imperial service. Autumn 720 AD, the princess Yu Zhen, younger sister of the Emperor Xuanzong, is relaxing with friends in her nunnery. The princess is a Taoist abbess, though she was not one to let her religious commitment spoil her appreciation of life. In fact, to become a nun, most particularly a Taoist nun, was a way that a wealthy or well-connected young woman could avoid unwanted marriage proposals and thus maintain her independence. The princess was deeply taken with a comely young man who was playing the pipa, a traditional Chinese musical instrument.
唐代科举还带有举荐之遗风，盛行通榜和行卷。通榜是指考官根据考生的社会声望和才德，指明代供录取时参考。为了能上通榜，考试应试前需多方研卷，也就是将自己的诗文佳作投献给有名望的公卿携带，以就得到赏识后向主考官推荐。
The pipa player, Wang Wei, was a multi-talented young man. He excelled at both poetry and paintings. Despite his talent, the first time he took the imperial examination, he failed. In order to get a recommendation, he sought out another of the princess's brothers who introduced him to the princess. Wang Wei succeeded in touching the heart of the Princess Yu Zhen, who duly recommended him to the selection officer. The second time he took the exam, he passed with the top score.
由于唐代科举考试重视诗赋，而通榜和行卷又要求应考试纸，以美文佳句求得名人赏识，就客观上就促进了唐代诗歌的繁荣，出现了王勃、陈之昂、贺知章、王昌龄、韩愈、杜牧、李商隐、柳宗元、刘勰等著名诗人和文学家，也使得唐代的文学艺术创作登上了历史的巅峰。
The scene is another autumn day, still further back in the Tang Dynasty. Emperor Taizong wishes to go hunting. As he sets out, soon Fu Qie, a minister for legislature, arrives to stop him. He is concerned the emperor might be injured during the hunt. An emperor should consider the safety of his empire before his own pleasure, soon Fu Qie lectured. The emperor was not pleased. However, it was a minister's responsibility to provide counsel to the emperor, and the emperor was obliged to consider it. Taizong explained to Sun that he had abstained from all entertainment in recent days, and that hunting was his only diversion. Moreover, he was well guarded and not likely to be injured by his companions. Sun Fuchie knelt on the ground and said, "If you must go, go over my dead body." His patience spent, the emperor ordered Sun's arrest and execution for his impudence. Sun was fearless, and he said he was ready to die for what he believed was right.
生活节是唐朝的开国名臣，在唐高祖和唐太宗两朝，历任侍御史、营部郎中、大理寺卿、陕州刺史等职衔。他的另一个身份是当上状元。唐武德5年，也就是公元682年，生活节在会试中名列第一，成为中国科举史上有文献可以考证的第一位状元。
Sun Fuchie served as a provincial official during the Sui dynasty, but his career was thwarted. When the Sui dynasty was overthrown, he threw his lot in with the Tang pretender, Li Yuan. Li Yuan's position as Emperor Tang Gaozu was established largely through the military success of his son, Li Simin. Sun became a trusted advisor to them both, constantly warning against repeating the mistakes that had brought down the Sui. In 625, Li Simin persuaded his father to yield the throne to him, and Li Simin, arguably the real founder of the Tang dynasty, was proclaimed Emperor Taizong. As the confrontation between the new emperor and his father's old minister reached its climax, a moment of life and death, Taizong burst out laughing. He said it was a test of Sun's courage and sincerity, and it was a blessing for the dynasty to have such a man serving at court. The emperor relinquished his hunting gear and invited Sun to play chess with him to pass the time.
"作为中国科举史上的首位状元，孙火切处事从容，容若不惊，体现了科举制度在初行之时对于人才选拔的高效和准确，也印证了特定历史条件下科举制度的先进性与合理性。
In the ancient feudal system of enfeoffment, men were chosen by their blood ties. In the recommendation system, men were selected as a result of their connections. The former often provoked resentment and scheming. The latter was a system rife with corruption. With the final evolution of the imperial examination system, where selection for promotion was primarily based on a candidate's exam performance, a comparatively fair and meritocratic system had been founded. The much-maligned Empress Wu Zetian, Empress of the Tang, and for a decade and a half, Queen Emperor of her own Zhou dynasty, was a great supporter of the examination system. As someone with a keen mind for intellectual affairs, she invited the top candidates to her palace and interviewed them personally. Though criticized for many things, Wu was always recognized and praised for her skill in employing good ministers. Under Zhao Kuangyin, founder of the Song dynasty, the imperial interview became the decisive element of the palace exam. As the emperors were styled the Son of Heaven, thereafter examination candidates would call themselves students of the Son of Heaven. Developments in the exam system were always ultimately driven by the changing social and economic conditions of the empire. Crucial in the end was the rise of a new landed class after the Sui dynasty land reforms in the 5th century. The examination system was to provide stability, prosperity, and competent governance through and beyond the vicissitudes of dynastic politics. It inspired an ever-expanding intellectual class and a prioritizing of the value of culture and education beyond transient material wealth.